Good morning, everybody. I'm going to go through this paper and I'm going to show you some of the things that are good about it. There are no perfect papers, but I think this is a good one. I think we can learn a lot from this. So let's take a look. I'm going to read some of this to you and then I'll talk about it. So it says here in Chinese culture, when a family member is diagnosed with cancer, they commonly refer to the saying, it's not the cancer that will kill them, it's the fear. I love this. It doesn't start with boilerplate. It doesn't start with summary. It starts with an interesting hook. This Chinese saying is what the movie The Farewell is centered on. I would have italicized The Farewell, not a big deal. Writer and director Lulu Wang created the movie based off of her own family's decision to keep her grandmother, Nai Nai, stage 4 lung cancer diagnosis from her. This is good. Notice it has boilerplate right here, the Lulu Wang, and then it has some plot summary. The movie follows the main character Billy, played by the actress Awkwafina, again, boilerplate, as she struggles to come to terms with the idea of keeping her Nai-Nai's diagnosis from her, despite her family's reassurances. That should be family's possessive, not a big deal. Again, nothing's perfect. The movie artfully covers the topic, artfully, notice there's some evaluation, that's a good sign, that's a good word, covers the topic of acceptance and grief, all the while exploring Chinese culture and customs when it comes to family, societal values, and matters of the heart. Good, right there. I thoroughly enjoyed evaluation, the way the music and soundtrack portrayed to the audience how the character may be feeling without speaking a word, and the symbolic elements that were placed throughout the movie, as well as its emphasis on Chinese culture. However, I still have a hard time wrapping my mind around the idea of keeping such big news from a family member, despite the family believing it was the right thing to do. This person is really, you didn't have to do this, but that's what the person did. They set up their whole paper. I have a feeling I know what the points for development are going to be. I'm going to say there's going to be a paragraph about the music and the soundtrack. There's going to be a paragraph about symbolic elements is what I'm thinking. And then there's going to be some discussion of Chinese culture. And it may be talking a little bit about the ending too. Let's see. This is a promise that it kind of makes, and let's see if it fulfills the promise. One of the first elements of this movie to interest me was the soundtrack. Stop. Here's what most, if not all, points for development paragraphs should do. In the first sentence, it should tell me what the point for development is, what aspect of the movie you're going to talk about, and whether you liked it or not. This does both. We're going to talk about the soundtrack, and we're going to talk, this person says that they liked it. It was interesting. Most often, the music gave the audience a glimpse into the mind of the main character, Billy. Now, I would think, okay, give me an example of that. The music moves from dramatic to riveting to mournful and is often a key part of each scene. One part of the movie that revolves around music was the mention of Billy and her childhood hobby of playing piano. Good. Now, do you see it says it gave the audience a glimpse, and our thoughts should be, where? Should give me an example. Right here gives me an example. Billy and her childhood hobby of playing piano. Billy's mother tells a story of when they moved to the U.S. and a pastor's kindness toward the family to allow Billy to use the piano at the church anytime she pleased, and how that was what America was like. However, when asked, Billy said she no longer played. Later, Billy sits down at the piano at her Nai-Nai's house after a heated talk between family members and plays a difficult song with great skill and with an edge of frustration. This moment artfully portrayed the emotions that Billy was feeling at that moment and was far more explanatory in my eyes than any commentary could have been. Love it. An example of the music. So like the soundtrack. And I would say it's not, I don't know if I'd call it the soundtrack. It's actually music within the film. We'll talk about diegetic versus non-diegetic sound. We'll get to that later. It doesn't matter. I still get the idea. That's a good paragraph. Another aspect of this movie that really stuck with me was the symbolism that was commonly littered throughout. Throughout the movie, probably shouldn't have those two words there. Not a big deal. Again, throughout the movie, Billy would get a bird stuck inside of her room despite the windows being closed, and she would have to release it back outside. After a conversation with her mother about her frustration and sadness over how she was upset that she never knew her grandfather was ever sick before he died, she returns to her room, and in a seemingly mystical moment, she gets one last visit from her grandfather. This was a very influential part of the movie for me since it tied together some previously confusing aspects of the movie. Now, again, right here, a visit from her grandmother. Is she referring back to the birds here, this person who wrote this? Not sure. We might need a little bit more right here. And it tied together some previously confusing aspects. Might need a little bit more explanation right here. Still, I know that the symbolism is what we're talking about here. Started talking about the birds, didn't tie together the birds and the grandfather perfectly clearly for me, and I'm not sure what confusing aspects they're talking about, so a little bit more here would certainly help. And then, however, despite my overall positive view of this movie, I still found it unsettling on how normal it was to her family to keep the news of sickness from their family members, which becomes more known throughout the movie. Well, I believe that the idea of bearing the grief of this information for their matriarch, good word, was a powerful message. I also found it to be sad and immoral. By keeping this from her, she may not be able to seek the medical treatment she may want or allow her to say her final goodbyes. I myself could not imagine keeping something so big from someone I love, but it is very interesting to see how normalized it is within Chinese culture. I like it. I mean, that's a good paragraph. This paragraph probably doesn't need a specific instance because it's really about the main idea of the movie. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, the specific example there. With that, I am led into my final comment on this movie. I really enjoyed how they tied in American and Chinese culture into this movie and Awkwafina's ability to provide example of this throughout the movie. You see this paragraph, this sentence maybe needs a little work. As I was reading it, you might have noticed it. Again, not perfect, but good. It stuck with me the most when she was discussing with her family if they should tell her grandmother or not, and she had to ask her father how to say illegal in Chinese. I thought it was an incredibly important aspect, and the movie would not have been half as good if they had made the movie all in English. Now, again, I want maybe a little bit more about why that particular thing, why that instance is the part that stands out. So why that word illegal? Maybe a little bit more after about that. Is it because it felt like it was immoral, or I don't know. I just need a little bit more right there. I really enjoyed getting to see all the different parts of their culture and seeing how it compares to American culture and how there is much to be appreciated through the eyes of someone who has never experienced it. Overall, this movie was beautifully made and thought out, and the part in the end when we find out that the Nai the movie was based off of is a real person and is still alive all these years after her diagnosis in 2013 that she still has yet to openly discover was heartwarming and really tied the movie together, and I have already recommended this movie to others. Okay, so that's good. That sentence got a little long there. You could hear it as I was reading it. That's one long sentence and it gets a little confusing, so maybe that needs some work. But here's what I love. Let's go back up here. So we have the soundtrack, opinion, and what the paragraph is going to be about, a point for development. An example from the movie ties it together and brings it back. This one, the symbolism, talked about the bird, liked it. Don't know if it was perfectly tied together with grandfather, maybe needs a little more explanation here. I thought this paragraph was good. Didn't need anything from the movie, I didn't think. It was just an overall idea about the culture. And then right here, this part, I love it. I enjoyed evaluation, opinion, how they tied American and Chinese culture together. Now, and it does talk about how the movie wasn't all in English. So, I mean, I feel like this is good. This is okay. But why that particular scene? What was it about that word illegal that was so interesting for that? I like this. I like everything there. I just need a little bit more explanation of why that scene was chosen. And then the bringing it together at the end, we had how many paragraphs for the development? 1, 2, 3, 4. Didn't necessarily need to be that long. I'm not actually sure how long this is. Let's see on the word count. This one is 835 words. I asked for it to be about 500 or more. So even if we just said, let's take one, it doesn't matter which paragraph, but if you didn't have to do 4 body paragraphs, but they did it here. I think 3 body paragraphs would probably get you to 500 words. So I hope you're seeing how these are put together. And I didn't want to choose one. I wanted to choose one that could use a little bit of work, but had all of the things that were right there and could help you. So I hope this helps you get an idea of what we're looking for. We have boilerplate with things like Lulu Wang and Awkwafina. We have evaluation or opinion, which is it interested me. We had plot summary right here, which I thought did a good job. And then we had points for development. And each paragraph was its own point for development and it was focused on that one idea with an example from the movie. You can also refer back to the Points for Development video that I made, or not video, the Points for Development paragraphs that I put in the teams. But I hope this helps you do your best next draft.